Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, 3 Stories. My name is Zsuzsi and today's video is the 2023 mid-year book freakout tag. It is that wonderful time of the year when booktubers are reviewing their reading year and they are all putting out this tag, and this is one of my favorite videos to watch, and this is my first time making it because I have a booktube channel now. Now let's start with some numbers because that is what you get when you open the video of a scientist. So far, as I am recording this video, I read about 76 books, which is crazy to me. So if we just look at the amount, this reading year has been going very, very well for me. And I don't do star ratings, so I never look at my reading and I never review my rating like that, but I must say that I've read some truly amazing books this year, and I am going to talk about those books in this video. And even those books that were not like shaking my core, they were still really good. So I'm very happy in terms of the quantity, and in terms of the quality, I think that I'm doing really great. Now let's get to the first question, which is, what is the best book that you've read so far in 2023? And to me personally, this was the easiest question to answer because this is definitely A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. For those of you who don't know, Ruth Ozeki is an American-Japanese filmmaker and writer, and she is also a Zen priest. And this book from her, she has written many books, but this book from her got all those elements because this book is a mystery with sci-fi elements and Zen Buddhist teachings. And this was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, and I've said it in another video and I say it again that I am not going to fight that. I am not going to fight a nomination for a Pulitzer Prize. We just simply have to accept that this is a fantastic book that everybody should read. So about the plot, just briefly, Ruth, one of our protagonists, she lives in Vancouver, Canada, and she is a writer who's trying to write the memoirs of her mother, who is unfortunately suffering from Alzheimer's disease. But Ruth herself is suffering from writer's block. And then one day, walking on a beach, she stumbles across a Hello Kitty lunchbox, and when she opens that lunchbox, it's full with diary entries and letters from a girl, a 16-year-old teenager girl called Nao Yasutani, who lives in Japan. Now, if this start to this book, because obviously this is just the start, if this doesn't want to make you pick up this book, then I don't know what will make you pick up this book. This book is a very gentle mystery book, in my opinion. Ruth asks the question, okay, where did this lunchbox come from? Who is Now? What happened to Now? Is she still alive? Like, does Ruth have the power to, for example, change Now's fate? This is an incredibly intelligent novel, and we discuss so many issues in this book. And just to mention a couple, obviously I am not able to touch on everything, but we discuss environmental issues, we discuss pollution. There are sci-fi elements to this book, so we discuss quantum physics and the possibility of different worlds. We also touch on history and the Second World War, and I must warn you to look up the trigger warnings online because this book has a lot of triggering elements to it. So if you feel that this book is slow, you're right, this book is slow. But please be patient because Buddhism is in this book is a very big topic, and this book purposefully asks you to slow down and be in the present while reading this book. One of the biggest Buddhist teachings, is about appreciating the now. Don't spend too much time in the past, and also, don't spend too much time wondering what is going to happen to you in the future, because what we truly have is just the present moment, and that is what the book is trying to make you appreciate. If you feel that this is slow, please don't give up because everything is going to come together, and when it does, it will be a book and it will be a novel that you've never read before. Now, A Tale for the Time Being, that was the best fiction book that I read this year, but I want to give a shout out to the best audiobook that I read this year, which is Not surprisingly, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Listening to this book is a very unique experience and a much better experience than reading it physically, because in the audiobook they have full cast narration and this story is told in an interview format. So when you listen to the book, it kind of feels like a documentary, and that is exactly what Taylor Jenkins Reid intended. This book is a very simple story about the rise and fall of a 1970s rock band. And Daisy Jones is definitely our protagonist. She is in the center of the story, but it is not just about her, it is also about the band, and it is also about the side characters. And I tend to like the side characters more than the protagonists, and probably that's why I also really love this book and the story. We touch on so many important things in this book. We touch on feminism and female empowerment. Daisy is a very typical Taylor Jenkins Reid character. You know, she is very confident and she doesn't accept limitations and she demands credit when it is due. But besides feminism, this book also touches on alcohol and drug addiction and what it can do to us and what it can do to the people that we love. And also this book discusses love and relationships, and it was really touching. I instantly connected with this book and it made me very emotional. It didn't make me cry, unfortunately. None of the books so far this year made me cry. I just spoiled another question, but it made me very emotional and I love this book. And the best non-fiction book that I've read so far this year, and I'm not even sure that I should be showing this book because I've only read 3 non-fiction books this year, so you know, there was no real competition. But nonetheless, this book is really good, so I'm just gonna give it a shout out, and that is A Taste for Poison by Neil Bradbury. So this book basically reveals how 11 very famous and very notorious poisons affect the body through the murders in which they were used in. This book is a blend of science and medical history and true crime. And honestly, I really enjoyed it. Sometimes people in the past, they didn't know what these poisons could do to the human body. Like for example, arsenic, they used it for pest control and they used it like in Victorian wallpaper. But then there were other people who knew exactly how to kill using these poisons and using these toxins. So we get a lot of stories here. We get stories of heartbroken people and lovers and different spouses, female, male, who just wanted to get rid of their husbands or wives. We also get a couple of assassination tales. Like really, it was very interesting, and I think I finished this book in like 2 days. Okay, so the second question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far in 2023? For me, again, this is an easy answer. This is A Ballad for Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book in Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and the third book is coming out this October, so I will not have to wait a long time to finish this series. So just briefly about the plot. The plot of the first book. I don't want to talk about the second book because that's obviously going to spoil the first book, as it is always the case with series. So Once Upon a Broken Heart, it follows Evangeline Fox, who makes a deal with the Prince of Hearts, with one of the fates named Jax, in order to save her one true love. But then she realizes that making bargains with the fate is probably not a good idea because he clearly has some other plans for her. When it comes to fantasy series, and honestly like series in general, I think it is always the first book that I enjoy the most, because that is the book that gets me introduced to the world and to the different characters, and because of that, that is what I enjoy the most, and that is what I hold, you know, always close to my heart. And because of that, the sequels, and especially like the second book in the series, it's very hard to enjoy those books because it always seems that these books just cannot kind of keep up with the first one. But in this series, that wasn't the case. This second book actually kept me entertained. It was not just like a bridge between the first one and then the third book, like, possibly like, the final book in the series. No, it had plot, it had character development, it had all kinds of like twists coming at me from all direction, and I had no idea what was happening. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still kind of confused, but confused in a good way. And the ending of this book, now Stephanie, the ending of this book, that was very cruel. Like, that was really, really cruel. It makes you want to pick up the third book immediately. So if you're somebody who hasn't read this series, I would recommend that you wait till October until the third book and the final book, I must say, comes out, and then read it, because that was just cruel. That's all I can say. The ending is just cruel. The third question is, what is a new release that you haven't read so far but want to? I think to me it has to be In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune, because I never read anything from TJ Klune, and honestly I think he's like published 3 books so far, and reading the plots for all those books, I think this is the one that sounds the best. Obviously I haven't read this book, so I don't know what the plot is about, but, and I'm looking at my computer now, like based on what I was able to gather from the internet, it is a queer retelling of Pinocchio, and it stars an inventor named Victor, and then a mysterious android called Hap, which is like a hysterical angry puppet, and an anxiety-riddled Roomba vacuum named Rambo. And also, they got like a sociopathic nursing machine in this book. I don't know what else to say. I mean, to me, this sounds amazing. Okay, fourth question is, what is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And again, to me, this is very easy to answer, because this is, without a doubt, is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. This is coming out on August 15th, and I cannot wait, because it feels like another like fairy tale retelling by T. Kingfisher, and Netherland Bone was so amazing that if she does anything like similar to that, I know that I will really, really love this book. The cover is really beautiful, and apparently T. Kingfisher did some illustrations in this book, so I also cannot wait to see that. Again, I haven't read this book, so I cannot really say anything about it or anything about the plot, but if we just look at the Goodreads description, like this is how it starts. There is a princess trapped in a tower. This isn't her story. I mean, of course I want to read it. Are you kidding me? So on Goodreads, the description says, like, meet Toadling. On the day of her birth, she was stolen from her family by the fairies. But she grew up safe and loved in the warm waters of fairyland. Of course she did. But once an adult, though, the Fae asked a favor of return to the human world and offer a blessing of protection to a newborn child. Simple, right? Well, nothing with fairies is ever simple. Centuries later, a knight approaches a towering wall of brambles where the thorns are as thick as your arm and as sharp as swords. He's heard that there is a curse here that needs breaking, but it's a curse Toadling will do anything to uphold. This sounds so good. And again, if this is anything like Netherland Bone, then I think we have a really, really good book coming. Okay, fifth question. What is the biggest disappointment of the year? And to me, this was Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, and for 2 reasons really. One, this was one of my most anticipated releases of 2023 in the United States. This book was released in 2023. I think that in the UK and maybe in other parts of the world it was 2022. I'm not sure, sorry. But in the United States, this came out in 2023. And I expected that this book would be a very feminist Medusa retelling. And just look at that cover, like Medusa is on the cover, so that is, you know, what readers would expect. But that's not what it was. Like, Medusa was in this story, like, I don't know, like 30-40% of the story was about Medusa, and everything else was about the gods, and you know how petty they were and how they fought each other, and how always humans paid the price for the gods' actions. Like, for example, think of the story of Poseidon and Medusa. This really didn't work for me. If you want to read a good feminist Medusa retelling, that I recommend Medusa by Jessie Burton. I just finished this book a couple of days ago, and I think that this was amazing. So I still got my Medusa content this year, just not from Natalie Haynes. All right, what was the biggest surprise of the year? And that's, again, easy to answer. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And it's not just about this first book, it is about the entire series, because this series brainwashed me. I am obsessed with this series and I have no idea how this happened. I didn't expect anything from this book, and I didn't expect anything from this series, because, you know, when you look up reviews about this book online, that there are people who love it and there are people who hate it. And the people who hated it, they said that, oh, this is basically just fairy smut and there is no character development, the plot is really convoluted and it's just not enjoyable at all. I know that people out there, they criticize Sarah J. Maas's writing, and you know, it's not perfect, and the book itself, or the book series itself, is not perfect, it's not without flaws, but it's nothing serious that I personally cannot deal with. I have 2 ACOTAR reading vlogs on my channel, and that includes all my thoughts and all my feelings about this book and about this series. All the plot and the characters and everything is discussed there, so I will leave it down below. If you want to, you can check that out. You'll see how much I love this series. I'm very happy that I read this book and I read this series, and I cannot wait for the sequels. I said it in one of my videos and I say it again, that this book is one of the best things that happened to my 2023 reading year. Question number 7, who is your new favorite author? Well, to me it must be Carissa Broadbent. I just finished The Daughter of No Worlds from Carissa. Whoa, it was amazing. This blew my mind. Now let's not talk about the cover. Let's not do that. I still don't understand how the publishing house and how the author agreed to this cover, because it doesn't do justice to the book. The content, amazing. Now this story is about Tisana, who as a child, a very young child, she was sold to slavery, and she had nothing else to use to survive but her wits and her willpower. For years, she collected money to be able to buy her own freedom, and on the night when she tries to buy her freedom, her master almost kills her. She escapes, but she is desperate to help not only her best friend, but also all the other slaves who are suffering in this system, and she seeks help from the orders. But she cannot join the orders without training, and that's when our second protagonist, Max, comes into the picture. He is the one who is going to train her. So he is basically our Cassian 2.0. Like, I've heard other people describing him as Cassian 2.0, and I think that description is actually pretty correct. Carissa Broadbent is not only an amazing writer, like her characters are really, really complex. There is character development. The plot is very fast-paced. This is a long book. I mean, this is fantasy, like, you know, almost all fantasy books are super long, but it's very fast-paced, and there are things actually happening in here. And something in this book that I really appreciated, being an immigrant myself, is that Tisana in this story was basically a foreigner, and she didn't speak the language. At least she didn't speak the language flawlessly, and she had accent. And if you are listening to the audiobook, then I think that she has a very cute accent, and I love that Carissa Broadbent went the extra mile and she made this female protagonist into a foreigner. That for so many people means a lot. Max is an amazing male character and an amazing male protagonist also in this book. The writing is beautiful because it is very painful and very emotional. You really feel everything that the characters are going through, and then there is so much depth to this story, and there is so much to unravel in this book. It is mind-blowing, and of course I don't have to say that I am continuing this series, and I am also picking up some other books that Carissa Broadbent has written because oh wow. Oh wow, that's all I can say. All right, question 8. Who is your fictional crush? Well, I'd like to belong to the group of people who say, oh, I don't have fictional crushes. Because I do. I do. And let me take you back to my very first Akotar reading vlog for a second. And then, oh, Lucian. Lucian is my favorite. Lucian is the babe. I love him. I think that Sarah J. Maas wanted to write Lucian's character as the typical like fake character because they are super tricksy and super pranksy, and they are very wicked and witty, and I think that Lucian is all that. I mean, I love him. He is my favorite character. I hope that we will not ruin his character, and I hope that he will get his own book and his own love interest, because I just want him to be happy already. It's like, oh well, this is embarrassing. One day I will look back at these videos and I will ask myself, why? Why did you have to put this up on the internet? Well, with this, I consider this question answered. Question number 9, who are your favorite new characters? So my favorite characters this year, I think like my favorite character must be Lahaba from Crescent City, because I love that fire sprite, like the gossipy and smutty fire sprite who likes to watch trashy soap operas instead of doing her work. Are you kidding me? I think she was a fantastic character. And even in Crescent City, I must say that Rune was a runner-up, but Lahaba won. But also I really liked the dragons in Fourth Wing. I am going for Lahaba, but also I am mentioning the dragons from Fourth Wing. Okay, question number 10. What book made you cry this year? Well, no books made me cry this year. But to be fair, it is really not easy to make me cry. I do want to put it out there. But there are books that made me very emotional. The number one book that I have to mention here is The Sun and Her Flower by Rupi Kaur. And this is a poetry collection. This came out a couple of years ago, but I read it this year, and I'm not sure if you can tell, but I mark like basically half of the book. And this poetry collection did make me very emotional because it's got so many different poems, like, you know, revolving around different topics like feminism and heartbreak and immigration and self-love, self-hate, and about the relationship that we have with our parents. She so effortlessly covers like such important topics in this book. the fact that this was self-published, and you know, she is the one who draw the different illustrations in this poetry collection. Wow, like I finished this poetry collection in 24 hours, and that's not something that I like to do with poetry, because poetry is like basically, you know, like snacking. You just leave it on your nightstand and you pick it up every now and then, you read a poem every now and then. But with this, honestly, I cannot put it down, and I cannot wait to pick up her second poetry collection. Okay, question 11. What book made you happy? Well, it's the Margaret Rogerson books. I really loved An Enchantment of Ravens, and that is the one that I picked to answer this question. But I also read Sorcery of Thorns from her, and that book was amazing. But I think that this story was like funnier and sweeter and very light-hearted, and it gave me so much joy. So in this book, our heroine is Isabel, who lives in the town of Whimsy, and the Fae folk often comes to Whimsy to trade enchantments for craft, because Faes, as we all know, they cannot craft, like they cannot write, they cannot paint, they cannot cook, they cannot bake, and so on and so on. And Isabel is a painter, and she often paints the portraits of these fairies. And then one day, Rook, the autumn prince, shows up at her door, and he asks her to paint his portrait, which she does, but she is having a little bit of trouble painting Rook's eyes. And accidentally, and not accidentally, but also not purposefully, she paints human sorrow in his eyes, and because of that, the other fairies, they think that Rook is weak, and Rook cannot have that. So he kidnaps Isabel. He wants to take her to court because it is obviously a crime to paint sorrow in somebody's, like in Rook's eye, and she needs to pay for that. And on their way to the court, they get entangled in the wild hunt, and then they have to become allies, and obviously they begin falling in love. Isabel is a wonderful character. Like, I think when it comes to Margaret Rogerson, her female characters are truly really, really wonderful, and she tends to make the male characters into very immature, but in a funny way, and that is exactly what happened to Rook in this book. And that is why I enjoy this book, because when it came to the communication between Rook and Isabel, like, I laughed out loud so many times. It was crazy. Like, Rook is not accustomed to human customs, so you know, he doesn't necessarily know how to treat Isabel. He doesn't know what, like, you know, the tears are. He doesn't know how humans eat, and we end up with a lot of funny situations. And also, just like I mentioned, the communication between the two, I loved it. And it wasn't a very long book. Sorcery of Thorns has kind of like a similar build-up, I think. We have very strong and mature female character, and then the one who is really, really funny and makes us laugh is the male character. And I don't know, this formula really tend to work with me. All right, question number 12. What is the most beautiful book that you bought or received this year? Now, this was hard to answer, but I picked Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, because this cover, I think this cover is gorgeous. And I'm not sure that you can see all the gold foiling that's going on the cover. Now, I must point out that this is the UK cover, and I ordered this book from the UK, because the US cover, that is a disaster. Like, I don't know who approved that cover. I really don't like it. But this is not just about the cover, because the plot and the story and the characters in this book, it was all like, it was a package. It was so good, and I highly recommend this book and the whole series, really. But wait a little bit, because just like I said, the ending of the second book is cool. So wait a little bit and read it in October. You will not regret it. Okay, and the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Oh well, now look. Two things. One, my TBR is about 500 books long. I cut it down from 600 to 500, but still it is like about 500 books long. And two, I am somebody who truly enjoys everything. I enjoy fiction, I enjoy non-fiction, I read whatever, classics, poetry, fantasy, sci-fi, literary fiction, contemporary fiction, you name it, I read it. But I am a very mercurial reader. I wouldn't even say I'm a mood reader. I am mercurial. I think that is the best word to describe me. And I basically decide about my TBR like maybe weekly, and I read multiple books at the same time. For some people, it's a chaos. To me, this is the natural order of things, okay? So this question is really hard for me. But I made a list of books that I want to read maybe in the upcoming weeks. I don't know about the rest of the year. I am working on a video, by the way, to build a TBR for myself, or a pile of possibilities for the rest of the year. But these books I want to read in the upcoming weeks. Carissa Broadbent, just like I said, I am continuing with the War of Lost Heart series, volume 2 and volume 3, and it is a finished trilogy. And when I finish that, I also want to start this other book from her that is a big sensation and is going around. It's a duology, and I think the first book is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I don't know the title of the second book, but people think that it is amazing, and I believe them. I also picked up 2 books from Rebecca Mackay. One of them is The Great Believers, and this one has been on my reading list for a very long time. This is about the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. And then I also have another book from her, I Have Some Questions, and this is kind of like a mystery with true crime elements. I don't know what to expect, but people tend to have really good opinion about these books. And as far as fantasy goes, I am picking up Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This will be my first Brandon Sanderson book. He is somebody who is so intimidating to, I'm not him as a person, but like his books and his series, it is something that's so intimidating to me because it is epic fantasy, and I don't have problem with epic fantasy, but I don't want to enter like a, I don't know, 10 books long Brandon Sanderson epic fantasy story. So I decided to pick up a standalone, and that is going to be Tress. We also have 2 new releases in July that I want to check out. One of them is Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I think I enjoyed the X-Talk, and I also enjoyed The Weather Girl from her, so I am checking that new release out. And we also have the sequel in the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The new book is coming out in July, and this book is supposed to be told by the male protagonist and not the female protagonist, and I think I'm going to enjoy that because I've spent enough time in Poppy's head, so I am also checking out that book. I am definitely reading the Throne of Glass series this year. The plan is still, I'm not sure that this is going to happen, but the plan is to read it in the summer. I might do it in the fall depending on how I feel with fantasy series, but Throne of Glass is definitely on my list. I loved Akotar and I loved Crescent City, so I need some Sarah J. Maas content because the newest book that we get from her is like January next year or something like that. So I am reading Throne of Glass. I also want to read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies because this seemed to be like a very academic book, and academia, hey, and how women are treated in academia, that's also maybe something that possibly discussed in this book. I have no idea, but I want to pick it up. All right, this is it, guys. This is it for today's video, and I hope that you enjoyed spending some time with me. I will include everything in the description box, like the questions and the original creator of this tag and all the books that I mentioned. I hope that you got some really good recommendations out of this video, and please tell me what were the best books, the best fiction, the best audiobooks, and the best non-fiction books that you've read so far in 2023. Share, like, and subscribe to my channel if you want to. You are welcome here. You are welcome to hang with me. And I see you in another video coming very soon. Bye.